And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Todd Erzin. No, I'm not. I'm Steve Deace.
Freaky Friday? What's going on?
Someday I want to be Todd Erzin when I grow up. But today is not yet that day. I am Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. This is what happens when you go Todd, like Mel Kiper right before we start the show. I then turn on, I'm Todd. No, I'm not. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. He's Aaron McIntyre. We are brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American, even for people named Todd. You'll find something that you like from a great coffee company that makes, first and foremost, great coffee, but also they do it by supporting the same great American values as you. If you want to get a discount on your order, go to firstcup.com. Use the code DACE to do that. Firstcup.com. They'll ship it to you within days of being roasted. The roast on dates right there on every single bag. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. That's firstcup.com, promo code DACE. And I want to also mention here, before we get into the program, issue 2 of our new quarterly magazine here at The Blaze, Frontier. Is now out. And if you missed the first one, you really missed out. I mean, the level of craftsmanship on this very first issue was absolutely tremendous. Frontier is about truth. It's about legacy. It's about telling stories that actually matter. And you can't buy Frontier anywhere. It's not in storage. It's not online. The only way to get it is through Blaze Unlimited. And that's so much more than just a way to get Frontier. You also get early access to exclusive events, VIP opportunities, dedicated customer support, VIP treatment, exclusive members-only content, and a premium experience for those who demand more. That's how you can go even deeper with us here at The Blaze. The latest issue of Frontier includes a feature by yours truly, a list of the 10 movies every dad needs to watch with his son before he ventures out of the house and onto his own. All right, so that's my offering in the latest edition of Frontier. So if you act right now, the first 500 people who subscribe get both issue 1 and issue 2. That's right, the full Frontier experience from the beginning. At blazeunlimited.com/Deace. Use the code BLAZE500 to get $40 off your subscription. Again, blazeunlimited.com/Deace. Use the promo code BLAZE500 to get $40 off your subscription at blazeunlimited.com/Deace. All right, coming up on today's show, we are loaded for bear today. We're going to be joined by the one and only Nerdrotic. If you are not following his content on YouTube, you are missing out, as he has become one of the leading pop culture critics in the country. And he's going to join us for Pop Culture Tuesday on Disney's latest flop. Folks, Disney went almost 40 years without a film that failed to make money at the box office. You have to go all the way back to The Black Cauldron, which, by the way, is not a bad movie. So I'm not exactly sure why they didn't land in 82 or 83, whenever that was. And now they are on the brink of their 5th in just the last 4 years, if you look at Marvel, Disney, Pixar, et al. How did this happen? We'll get into this with some of you know him as Gary Buechler, but the rest of you know him as Nerdrotic. He's going to join us here towards the end of the show. Next hour, we're going to play Fake News or Not. At the bottom of this hour, if you follow X, righty or Christian X at all, this is a name that has come up quite often in the last few months. Fair?
Yeah.
It's come up a couple times, right? That name would be the one and only Joel Webbon. And he's going to join us here at the bottom of the hour. And I'm just going to ask him point blank. Are you an anti-Semite? Are you? We'll just ask him, see what he says. So he'll join us here at the bottom of the hour. But let's kick this off as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by the only two things really most people are talking about, and it's not super happy fun times. First up, Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief at The Atlantic, was inadvertently added to a Signal group chat between Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, among others. The group chat was set up on the encrypted messaging app Signal by the aforementioned Waltz, with the intention of discussing messaging and some non-classified plans surrounding the then upcoming attack against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg followed along in the discussion and documented parts of it in an op-ed he published yesterday. In the message thread, notably, Vice President J.D. Vance was the voice of dissent as to whether or not the U.S. should actually bomb the Houthis, and he expressed disdain for European allies not pulling their weight in their own national security, and that was a sentiment that was shared by the broader group. Democrats have not yet decided whether they are seizing, pouncing, swooping, or rallying, but they generally agree this instance of fat thumb comes from National Security Advisor Waltz is worse than 9/11. What actually likely happened, as some have pointed out, is that Waltz was likely trying to add U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer to the group chat. He has the same initials as Jeffrey Goldberg. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says nothing highly classified was discussed in that group chat.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence, we will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning.
President Trump told NBC this morning NSA Waltz has learned his lesson. The second story that many are talking about is President Trump's new pick to lead the Centers for Disease Control after the withdrawn nomination of Dave Weldon owing to his insufficient fealty to vaccines. Trump's new pick is Dr. Susan Menarez, who is already the acting director at CDC. She spent much of her career in federal public health policy and research, and based on her ex account, she was a branch Covidian during the pandemic.
Not great, Bob.
And that's what happened while we were away.
All right, Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Fast Growing Trees. They've got the biggest online nursery in the country, thousands of different plants, over 2 million happy customers. They've got all the plants that your yard needs, like fruit trees, privacy trees, flowering trees, shrubs, and so much more. Whatever you're interested in, they've got you covered. Plus, you get support from their trained plant experts on call with a plan to help you plan your landscape and choosing the right plants and learn how to care for them as well. We've used Fast Growing Trees. Their online catalog, while extensive, very easy to navigate, shipped right to your door. So you don't have to worry about going to the local nursery and then getting all that crud in the back seat of your car or any of your minivan. They'll ship it right to your door. All right. So big yard, small yard, no yard. They've got 6,000 plants to fill any space from indoor to outdoor. All right. And this spring, they've also got the best deals as well. Half off on selected plants and other deals. And if you're one of our followers here on the Steve Deace Show, you get 15% off your first purchase by going to fastgrowingtrees.com and using the code DACE. That's fastgrowingtrees.com, promo code DACE. Now is the perfect time to plant. Use code DACE today to save for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply at fastgrowingtrees.com. So and maybe this is why you chose these two issues, Aaron, not just because they're the only two things people are talking about at the moment, but it is fascinating to me that in the news cycle today, we have two issues that both take prevalence when they were really the two issues that created the most self-inflicted damage to Trump's first term. So from the very beginning, Trump faced an inordinate amount of obstacles to his administration, which meant that the performance level had to be high. The margin for error was going to be low, and the performance level was going to have to be high and consistently so to avoid all the landmines laid out before him, from a 3-year Russia collusion hoax to all the other hoaxes Pete Hegseth mentioned and referred to in that clip there, and then the scamdemic hoax that was dropped on his lap and effectively ended what was left of his presidency. And unfortunately, well, first of all, let me say this. You're never going to bat 1,000. The greatest hitter maybe that ever lived, the best season he ever had, is he failed 60% of the time. The greatest hitters of all time, all the greatest hitters in Cooperstown, all of them failed throughout the course of their careers, even at the very height of greatness. Over the course of their careers, failed about 65% of the time. And as hard as it is to hit a baseball from a pitcher in the major leagues, which I would say might be the single hardest thing to do in American team sports, the job of the U.S. presidency is way harder. Fair?
Sure.
So you're not going to bat 1,000. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to step on rakes. In the NFL, they look for corners who have what's called amnesia and recovery speed. Why? Because the receivers are too good. You're going to get burned. So you're looking for, hey, I got burned on the last play. I'm not going to get down about the next play. I forget about it, flush it, on to the next play. Or I got burned on this play, but I've got the speed to catch back up so I don't give up a 99-yard touchdown pass. That's a really good metaphor for what you need in politics at the highest level. Amnesia. You just can't turn a one-day story into a two-day story. You can't turn a one-hour story into an entire news cycle story. You can't do that. And then, can you recover? How fast can you catch up? Because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get burned. The other side, their guys are on scholarship too. And then there's just the human factor. Even if they don't get the best of you, some days you're just going to step on a rake. Some days it's just not going to be your day. And to quote the great prophet Dave Chappelle, you played yourself. Yesterday was one of those days for the Trump administration. This was really, from an operational standpoint, maybe going to the cathedral and getting lectured to by the demonic priestess there. Clearly, whoever was on the advance team for the president didn't plot that one out, right? But that actually ended up working out to their benefit in the end. They had all the right organic reactions to her preaching and everything else. If anything, that ended up further solidifying the faith his base had in this new administration on their way into the door. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
She was a great. She was a great obstacle to play off of. Okay. This was done entirely in a vacuum, and you see a couple of things here about ecosystems. You see, for example, J.D. Vance, even to high-ranking members of the administration, feels comfortable airing an opinion that doesn't necessarily align in full throat with the president's. Now, just to clarify, my issue on the Houthis would align with Trump's more than JD's, as much as I've been impressed by him. Because the Houthis, they've been called many things throughout the history of this country. They were originally called Barbary Coast Pirates. We've had this same issue with Islam all along. But I digress. But he feels free to air his personal thoughts at a very high level. But then also, if you read these texts, he also recognizes that his job now also is to support the White House and support the president. He does that very capably. So that kind of goes against the type of, and maybe that's how the Scaramucci's and Omarosas showed up in the first term. It was basically whoever slurped or groveled Trump the most got in, okay? But in this case, the fact that your vice president feels free to just express his own opinions that are somewhat independent of yours to other high-ranking members of the administration, and everybody's an adult here, and in the end, I recognize that my job is to support the president, so I will. That I think gives us a window into the soul of the ecosystem of this term of Trump compared to the first one. Fair?
I think so.
I think you also get an not that we needed any more of this. Not that we needed another one. But, for whoever's in the way back who didn't know this yet, you also get a vantage point into the ecosystem of the U.S. media at the same time. First of all, if it's news, why is it an op-ed? One of the things we're going to talk to Nerdrotic about later in the show is these studios that had these movies that were going to be really woke, and then the culture flipped on them, and so they had to go back like Snow White and reshoot whole swaths of them so they didn't get completely gutted by the public. But then in the end, the movie looks totally and completely disjointed and contradicts itself, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. The new Captain America is like that too. If the news here is so important that the public needs to know this more, then you feel like as an American, you should protect the national security interests of the United States government. And there are moments, frankly. We want a media, folks. Let's make sure we understand this here, okay? Because I know we're all out of whack and in the middle of a cold civil war right now. But idealistically, we want a media that does think at times telling the truth to the American people matters more than whatever the particular national security interest of the government in charge of the United States than its particular foreign policy agenda, right? We want that, right? We do want a media that does take telling the American people the truth above that, or is at least willing to consider.
Yes.
Is that ratio what's being exercised here, right?
Yes.
We do want a media that feels that conflict, correct? We want that, okay? Or they're at least aware of it, right? But if this merits this level of leak, then why wasn't it just news? Why is it somebody's op-ed column? You see what I'm saying?
Of course.
If it's news, it's news. If it's your op-ed column, then I would argue, if it's an op-ed column, then I would argue that it probably did not meet the threshold of choosing telling the American people the truth over defending the security interest of the United States, which I think also gives you a look again, as if anybody still needed it, into the ecosystem of corporate media and how they operate. And that really, they're not reconciling any such ratios of common good that I just articulated. Because the people in government, even the people we vote for, they're sinners too. There's going to be conflict there, right? There's going to be a moment that may arise at some point in time that even the people wearing our jersey need to get checked, right? But that's not the tension here within the ecosystem of our corporate media. The ecosystem is just frankly the advancement of whatever their own particular narrative is, vis-a-vis and in contrast to the very real tension that I'm just articulating here.
To your point, all these people, the Goldberg class, they're more concerned about this than they ever were about the Afghan withdrawal.
Correct.
So you guys can all stick it.
Correct.
That just shows who you are.
And this now gets to the quality of people that Trump has put around him, the response to this.
I need to make one correction to the montage. Apparently, the old CDC directors never scrubbed their X accounts. So when I did a customized Google search this morning, what looked like the new CDC director's tweets were actually the old CDC director's tweets. So I need to make that correction. I do know, though, our friend Daniel Horowitz is very suspect about this woman.
Oh, thank you for making that correction. Although, you know why no one understood that is because her previous record on these things is as bad
Probably,
as
yes.
what you is your mistake. Even your mistake was right about, which I'll get to that here in a minute, okay? Because it fits into the broader point I'm about to make here about the quality of staff. And then when we don't have that quality of staff. So in this case, the way that the Trump team responded, the way they turned this around on the media thought they had their very first Trump stepped in it. We can make this the entire cornerstone of programming for days, if not weeks on end, like we did how many times in 2017 and 2018, right? Okay. And unfortunately, Trump played into it too often, okay? Playing from behind and then having to make sure no one ever gets the last word. So we're going to make a 1 day story, a 1 week story, a 1 week story, a 1 month story, a 1 hour story, a 1 cycle story, right? Okay. Look how quickly this got put down in just the second half of the news cycle yesterday. Just completely and totally annihilated and destroyed. Now, to be fair to the first Trump term, whatever we thought the media's credibility was in 2017, and we didn't think it was very high then, whatever we thought it was then, it was galaxies beyond what it is right now. But nevertheless, you still have to call that bluff, right? You still have to push back on them at that level to expose that. And the way you saw Hexeth in particular in the clip, Aaron, that you highlighted there, just taking all of their previous lies and putting it right around their neck and kicking the chair out from underneath them right there, figuratively speaking, at the gallows of credibility. And then just say, all right, now moving on and back to our own agenda here. Thank you very much. This story's already over.
Yes.
And I promise you 24 hours ago, they thought this was the tide had turned, is what they thought on their side 24 hours ago. 24 hours later, this story is completely and totally over. So credit the execution, the superior execution of the Trump administration than what we saw the first term. Which then brings me to the CDC director pick. Now, if you put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around me, I never believed for a second we were going to go from Dave Weldon was too tough to Joe Ladapo. As much as I loved the consideration because it would be like a dream pick, but that's typically not the way politics works. You don't typically go even more based and more right after someone gets rejected for being too much of those things the first time around. So I never really thought we were going to go from Dave Weldon to Joe Ladapo, but to go to this. I mean, I would just love to know what the rationale for this pick was. First of all, why would you, even if you feel like you need to like balance out the various, because here's the thing we need to admit, let's be self-aware. More of us are becoming aware, and I say us, I'm pointing at myself here. More of us have become aware of the issues with America's public health policy and captured regulatory institutions in the last few years, right? That is true.
Yes.
We are all, here's what's also still true, folks, though. We're still a niche of a niche of a niche here. That's also still true. I think the facts are on our side. I think the truth is on our side. And I think when this is all said and done, history will render the verdict on our side too. But we're still a niche here. Bobby Kennedy still had the Kennedy name ID and everything else, and was struggling to get on, this time last year, was struggling to get on a critical mass of ballots to run it as an independent. We're still a niche here. This is, again, where X, maybe I won't say anymore that X is not real life. Maybe what I'll say now is it's not the fullness thereof. It's very clear in the Elon era, X is very impactful, okay? But it's also not talking to a lot of the broader electorate at the exact same time. So on X, those of us skeptical of these policies and directions and institutions, we're the majority on X. We are clearly the majority on X. In the broader public, we haven't reached that critical mass yet. We're still a niche. So I bring that up because even if you're Trump and you're like, listen, I'm a germaphobe and I don't want the COVID vaccines to be pulled because that makes me look bad, but I think Bobby Kennedy's data is pretty compelling, and I'm also concerned that everybody's morbidly obese and no one can do a chin up. You see what I'm saying? I've got a compilation of thoughts in my brain about these things. So I'm going to assemble like a team of rivals from various sectors and pit them against each other like we wanted Trump to do at the early days of COVID, right? Hey, put Johnny Anides and Jay Bhattacharya and Tony Katz at Yale and Harvey Risch at Yale. Put them in a room there with Fauci and we don't know. Put them all in a room together, put it on C-SPAN, unedited, no commercial breaks, and let's see him hash it out. Let's see the really smart people hash it out, right? So even if you're thinking that's what he's doing here, cool. Why pick someone from the Biden-Obama administration to do it? That makes absolutely no sense. Listen, folks, because we're a niche, there are plenty of Republican simps in the big pharma metaverse. Fair?
Yeah.
Plenty of them. Plenty of people who voted for Trump in the big pharma metaverse. One of them's one of his best buddies, Woody Johnson. There's plenty of them. You could at least get someone who's somewhat loyal to our side. If you're going to put somebody in there to be the fart in church, somebody in there to say, well, are you guys sure that, are you guys sure that if it's COVID, it was probably Paxlovid? Are you guys sure about that? Are you sure remdesivir doesn't cause renal failure and doesn't actually work against COVID? Let's check that. Okay, fine. But could we at least pick somebody that's like loyal to us? It's not like we're short of options here. There's all kinds of people on our side that have written big checks that are from these pharmaceutical entities that agree with us on 50 other issues we could have picked. Why pick someone from the Biden-Obama ecosystem? Makes no sense to me. I'd love to know the rationale for that. I mean, even the pick of the gal over Christmas that people lost their minds about. What position was she going to get? I can't remember. Because she had advocated...
Wasn't it Surgeon General?
Surgeon General, right. But she at least is one of the few people that went on national TV and said, don't give these shots to children. She at least did that. Almost nobody was saying that, actually. She at least did that. As bad as the rest of her discography on these issues were, at least she got that one right, when most people wouldn't even say that. This woman that he has for CDC is wrong on everything. It makes no sense. None. If we're going to be wrong, then at least let's do this proprietary, reward someone who's loyal to us on some other level, not someone who's actually directly from the enemy camp. I hate to say this, but this strikes me as the kind of move that was made in the first term on several different levels that just failed to self-correct and often stymied the first term to make sure everybody was on the same page. This woman's legacy is she's a loyalist to the other team. Doesn't make any sense. Now, the challenge for someone like me, frankly, just, you know me, I'm going to keep it real. And as long as I'm not violating a third-party conscience or third-party confidence, I'll tell you brutal honesty of what I'm thinking. I have been hesitant to comment about this on social media. And the reason why is because I am convinced if we cannot coax Trump into defying federal judges, all these other debates are irrelevant. His presidency is over.
Yep.
His presidency is over. Similar to, I wasn't a big fan of the COVID bailouts, but if we don't stop lockdowns, the COVID bailouts don't make a freaking bit of difference. So did we lose our spleens over the COVID bailouts during that period of time? No, we did not.
No.
You know why? Because we couldn't leave our homes. And so it's kind of, we had, our hierarchy of values here was we had to win that argument first. We'll worry about the other ones later. So as bad as this Surgeon General pick is, I'm concerned about how much of my own capital, because I am talking to people at a very high level in Trump world right now on the issue of once and for all putting the judges back where they belong. And so how much of my own capital, maybe I get the right person, maybe the president himself, to take a look at some of the stuff we're saying, or maybe I even just wrote for the Blaze last night. And then someone brings them, we say, well, he blasted you on your Surgeon General pick, and so they don't even look at you. So, I'm trying to figure that out. No one's got time to go through everybody's shows on what they say, so I feel a little bit, freer here. That because my meta point is, if we continue to let the courts and this judicial coup go to unabated, all these other issues we have right now that we're pissing and moaning about are all going to be irrelevant. Won't matter. Can't do anything. Put Joe Ladapo in there for CDC director. He tries to pull the shots. A court says you can't do that. What do? Courts have spoken. See what I'm saying? If we don't put the courts back where they belong, all the other complaints we have, in my opinion, and since the show Steve Deace show, my opinion carries a lot of weight. In my opinion, all the other debates are irrelevant at that point. And so I'm trying to spend the maximum amount of my attention and capital on that particular battle, because I think it's the thing that unlocks the conscience of the king here, so to speak. But what do you guys think?
Listen, it's a terrible pick, but there's a lot of people out there in the niche of the niche that you're talking about, and it's a bigger niche than it was before COVID. But you came to this, a lot of people came to it because they feel betrayed for any number of reasons. They were injured themselves, and they're very, very angry. All understandable things, but it doesn't mean you're thinking clearly about things. When I talk about the magical power of vaccines, that addiction at a corporate level, I'm just telling you, did you really think this was just going to Thanos snap and be done? You think it's evil. You're right that it's all evil. But you think evil's just going to here's the Epstein list. That's kind of what you think with this thing. It's just going to go away. People are demanding a seat at the table. Maybe this is okay, but she's going to have to prove herself. I don't know. I still wouldn't do that myself. But I'm telling you, we talk all the time about how Chamber of Commerce, the pressure it brings to bear on the illegal immigration, things like this. The insurance companies, Big Med, what they are demanding of this seat at the table, how much money is in an economy that Trump is trying to sustain. This evil just doesn't go away. You guys make excuses for the evil all the time as a non-con. I can't put my name on this because they might do something. Now think of that on steroids times a million and what's going on there. It is very, very evil. You're right. It's not just going to lay down. All right. That's the complexity and the dark magic behind all this.
As far as the judicial tyranny goes, yeah, I mean, if a federal judge, a district judge, feels like he can tell in the middle of a deportation flight that he has the power to tell those flights to turn around, there are going to be other judges who feel like they have the power to set health policy. They have the power to set personnel policy. They have the power. A small claims court in the New Mexico's Tularosa Basin has the power to hire and fire people. That's what this will descend into. So yeah, that is in terms of primacy, the judicial stuff is going to be the biggest fight, because if they think they have the power to do anything they want, that's going to be a problem, obviously.
All right, when we come back, he has he's been kind of trending on X a little bit the last few months. Pastor Joel Webbon will join us. Stay tuned. When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she often feels alone and afraid. So many times, her first response is to seek out those who are going to tell her she should murder her child. But because of the generosity of so many listeners and viewers like you, that search may also now lead to a preborn network clinic where she will be confronted with the truth. There must be, for truth to persuade, there must be a confrontation. That's unavoidable. The question is, will it be an effective one? Right? And you know, just like kindness isn't a tone, confrontation isn't a tone either. Right? You know, when your mom looked at you and said, I was really disappointed in you, her tone was sweet and soothing, but it gutted you just the same. The truth of that did. All right? So that's what preborn does. They take these moms thinking of murdering their children. They let them hear an ultrasound, which still costs just $28 if you want to fund one of those today. And more times than not, when mom hears that story, hears that ultrasound, she ends up being a story like Maddie. She wasn't sure who the father of her baby was. She received counseling, prayer, a free ultrasound at a preborn clinic. Everything changed. She discovered she had twins. She found the strength she needed to choose life. Her sorrows turned to joy. And you guys help make that story happen with your generosity. So let's keep it going. You can give with great confidence to Preborn, 100% charity rating. And here's what I love about them too. It's not just confronting the mom, but then they offer her grace when she steps away from the darkness and into the light and chooses a life. They're there with prenatal care, postnatal care, sometimes for up to 2 years after the baby is born. Even practical things like car seats. How about counseling for postpartum? All of this is free, by the way, even though none of it is. Free of charge. That's where you and I come in with our funding. Make a tax-deductible donation today to Preborn with its 100% charity rating so you can give with confidence. Do it one of two ways. Dial pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone. That's pound 250, keyword baby on your mobile phone. Or go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. Well, there is an event coming up in Temple, Texas here in a couple of weeks. I believe I've now had roughly 15 people, several of them would be names maybe most of you would know, try to talk me out of doing this event. And if you guys know the way I am wired, it just has encouraged me all the more to go and do it, okay? For better or for worse, you know, but I'm if you're coaching kids, there's the kind of kid that you say, I really think you can do that, and he'll do it. That's not me. I'm the kid that you need to say, you suck and you won't be able to do that. I'll just go do it to spite you. That's me. Okay. And the event is called Christ is King, How to Defeat Trash World. You can find out more about it at rightresponseconference.com, rightresponseconference.com. In fact, I'm not even going to be the only Blaze personality there. Our friend and colleague Oren McIntyre is going to be there as well. And the reason why several people have come to me and told me not to do this is because of some trending clips that have gone viral online. Except I got to be honest with you, a lot of these clips went viral from Mildred over at Right Wing Watch. That's her name now, right? Is it Mildred?
Ethel.
Okay. And let's just say Ethel, Mildred, whoever is still employed over there, has taken a keen fascination with some of my work over the years. Fair? Yeah. Okay. All right. I used to have my own page on that website, folks. All right. I used to have my own page. I think maybe they just gave up.
They give an award out now annually in your name.
All right. So why don't we just go straight to the source and try to get an answer for some of the controversies involving Joel Webbon. Pastor Joel Webbon joins us now. He is the host of this conference. It's good to have you on the Blaze. Joel, how are you?
Thanks, Steve. It's good to be here. I'm doing well.
So let me just start with a very direct question. All right, because I've had this thrown at me numerous times, okay, by people who think I should not do your conference. Are you an anti-Semite? And then how would you define that term?
According to the ADL, yes. According to the Word of God, no. The way that I don't even want to define the term. I honestly don't even want to give the term the time of day. It's not a biblical term. It's not a thing. So I think the question, biblically would be unjustifiable animus, hatred. And the reason why I add that descriptive before unjustifiable is because we do have verses in the Bible where David in the Psalms, he doesn't just say, hate the sin, not the sinner. He literally prays to the Lord, and he's boasting, as it were, not in a sinful pride necessarily. Don't tell Jason Whitlock I said that there's actually forms of being proud of something that's not necessarily sinful, but it's this sense of a righteous pride where he doesn't just say, oh, I hate sin, but I love the sinners. He says, do I not hate those? Not just that, or, but those who hate you, no, I hate them with a perfect hatred or a complete hatred. So there actually is something to be said for hating the enemies of God. And this is very different than the teachings of Christ. We have to have categories. And this is why a lot of Christians suck at politics. And this is why one of the reasons why I invited you, Steve, is because you actually know how to think in categories, right? You know how to go hard in the paint for DeSantis and lose a bunch of MAGA followers along the way, and then recognize, all right, Trump's the best option we've got. Primaries are over, switching for Trump, and then you lost followers on the flip side, and you were willing to lose both bookends of followers to do what you knew was right. You could think in categories, and one thing was not being inconsistent with the other. And so, all that being said, my point is this: Jesus, he gives us instructions for private, personal enemies. Turn the other cheek. Right? If he asks for your shirt, give him your tunic as well. To go 1 mile, go 2. So if I have a private, personal enemy, then I can look at like 1 Corinthians. It says, why not rather be wronged? These kinds of things. It's the glory of a man to overlook an offense. But when you're talking about the Philistines, when you're talking about public, universal political enemies that David was experiencing, and they're primarily, here's the key point, they're not just your enemy because you have a personal offense, or no, they have declared themselves to be public enemies of God. And so it's by proxy, it's by virtue of them being God's enemies that they are your enemies. Then there is a sense in which you could hate someone. That being said, that would be a justifiable hate. That being said, I do not hate Jews. In fact, I wish them a very pleasant conversion to Christianity.
Do you?
Go ahead.
I don't. I want to be fair as I possibly can. Okay, not necessarily to you. With all due respect, I am confident you can handle your own business, whether we're going to agree or not. To the audience. Because I think that you represent a view, and people like you represent a viewpoint that was.
A lot of people hate me, but go ahead.
I think you guys represent a viewpoint that was a baseline understanding of the relationship to some degree. Sometimes there would be added flair to it, like with some of Luther's commentary, for example. Okay, but the baseline understanding of Christianity and Judaism and their place in the covenant, post ascension, was not uncommon for centuries. In fact. And has largely, most Americans, their exposure to Christianity is in a post-Scofield Bible dispensationalist world, for better or for worse. And, there are great people that have these views and on different sides of these views, and I'm not going to claim I'm qualified or even called to referee them. But that view has become such a dominant view, Joel, that I think most American, even Christians, even forget about the God-hating world, even believers, I think, would be stunned to see, and maybe even like offended by today's standards, of what many people of great respect and regard throughout the history of Christendom thought of Christless Judaism. Okay,
right.
And so I'm concerned that maybe some of this. That's why I want to come to your event, because I want to break bread with you guys. I want to walk through your booths. I want to shake people's hands. I want to look them in the eye. Because I want to see for myself, I want to see how much of what's gone on around you and your ministry and others like you, how much of it is in ignorance of pre-dispensational understanding of what Christianity thought about the tension between Judaism and Christianity. And then, frankly, how much of it is, rightly or wrongly, directed at your group. Your thoughts on that?
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys, you particularly giving us a fair hearing. And I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised. I really do. You will not agree. I've listened to enough of your stuff. I'm not a daily listener, but I appreciate, you've got a good political sense, which is just, my goodness, so absent in the evangelical world. So an evangelical who actually can talk about politics without sounding ridiculous makes you like a unicorn, pretty rare. So I listen to you and tune in from time to time. And so I've heard enough of your viewpoints regarding Israel and these kinds of things to know that we're going to disagree. But I also know that you're fair, and I think you'll disagree, but you'll You'll be able to walk away from it saying, yeah, I think these guys are wrong on this secondary issue, but I don't think that they're anathematized and going to hell. And a lot of guys, let's just be honest, the discourse today on X especially, we're just not capable of that anymore. The vast majority of us, I can be guilty of this myself, but we don't have categories of saying, I disagree with the substance of your argument. We immediately go to, I disagree with you, and therefore, you're a monster, you're a demon. You're not a brother in Christ. You're beyond the pale. And so I appreciate you being one of those level heads who's willing to come and check it out. I'll give you in a nutshell my position if you're interested.
Sure.
Okay. So I am a partial preterist. Preterist is just Latin. It means past or fulfilled. And so that's what gets me, that's my hermeneutic, the way that I read Scripture, understand Scripture. And basically what that amounts to is that I'm going to be looking at a lot of the New Testament. Not all of it. That would be a hyper or full preterist, but a lot of the New Testament. And I'm going to say, you know what? I don't think that this is a future prophecy that's yet to be fulfilled still in our future. But I actually think this is something that was in the future of the immediate earthly audience that this apostle is writing to, or that Jesus is speaking to, like Matthew 24 and the Olivet Discourse. It was in their future. It was prophetic for them, but it is long in our past. So I would look at Matthew 24 where Jesus talks about, he's going to come on the clouds. There's going to be a judgment. The temple, not one stone left on another. And I would say that was a local judgment. And that's why Jesus specifically said, run. When you see, this desolation, flee for the hills. You can't flee the final physical return of Jesus. Jesus is going to return to judge the living and the dead. We're going to, in accordance with the Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed, there's going to be a final culmination of human history and a final literal physical return of Christ. And that is in our future. That has not yet been fulfilled. And when that happens, you can't run to the hills and hide from it. Right? That's where you get to the verses in Scripture. It's like they'll run into caves and beg for the rocks to fall on them, but there'll be no fleeing. There'll be no escaping from that universal judgment. This, Matthew 24, was a local judgment, and it was fulfilled in AD 70. And I believe that there was a parousia, a coming of Christ, that he was seated in the physical sense at the right hand of God the Father, but spiritually, he did come, and coming on clouds doesn't mean cherubim, playing harps. It's not pretty heavenly language. Clouds, it signifies judgment. Isaiah talks about clouds of judgment, or Joel chapter 2 talks about clouds of judgment. So Jesus comes and he judged those people. Now apply that to Romans 11. That's the key text when it comes to the Jews. I believe, Paul says that, and he's using Israel, I think at least in two different ways: spiritual Israel, but also physical Israel, according to the flesh, and then according to the promise. And he says that right now there's a partial hardening that has fallen in the sovereignty of God on Israel according to the flesh. But Israel will be grafted back in. Those natural branches that have been severed for a time, they're going to be grafted back in so that all of Israel will be saved. And I take that to mean all of elect Israel, but also all of physical Israel that was elect, that they would be brought back in, and that would kickstart a life from the dead type global revival, right? That Paul says if the natural branches being severed meant the Gentiles, the wild olive shoots being us being included, so them being separated, the natural branches, Israel according to the flesh, if that meant our inclusion, well, them coming back in is going to be an even better promise. It's going to be life from the dead. And I look at the last 2,000 years of church history, especially the last 1,000 to 1,500 years of Christendom, all the way from Constantine, or you could start with King Alfred, and I'm like, this kind of looks like life from the dead. Now, right now, I admit, we're in a downtrend. Right? There's some dips along the way. I think like the stock market, trajectory's up, but there can be some crashes and corrections. We're in a big correction, and have been for decades and decades, and arguably since the Enlightenment. So I totally admit that. But if we look at the last 1,000 to 1,500 years, I think we've witnessed, and I don't think we're done. I think there's more to come, but we have witnessed a life from the dead kind of revival. And I think it's because, here's the point, I think it's because Israel, according to the flesh, Jews in first century, that they actually were grafted back in. I think that Jesus prophesied in Matthew 24, these things are going to happen. And then they crucified the Messiah, And just for the record, who killed Jesus? God the Father killed Jesus. He was pleased before the foundations of the world were laid to crush him. Jesus killed Jesus. No one takes my life, I lay it down. I killed Jesus by my sin, which made his death necessary. Pilate killed Jesus by trying to cop out, but still making the political decision because he was up for re-election. The Romans killed Jesus in the physical, literal sense by driving the nails through his hands. And the Jews killed Jesus by making a kangaroo mock court in the middle of the night and pushing Pilate to do it. All those statements are true, but when the ADL tells me that one of those statements I'm not allowed to say, then like what you said earlier, Steve, then I kind of want to say that one even more. And that's kind of, so anyway, so that's where I'm at. So I think that the Jews, by God's grace, ethnic Jews in the first century, Jesus made this prophecy 40 years later in AD 70. They're seeing its fulfillment. And I think that a bunch of Jews converted to Christianity and got saved. And then the ones who lived, right, a lot of them were destroyed. The ones who rejected Christ, they were physically destroyed in Jerusalem. But the ones who were like, whoa, this is the fulfillment of exactly what Jesus warned us about 40 years prior in Matthew 24 in his Olivet Discourse, then they believed in Jesus, were converted to Christianity, and they also practically obeyed Jesus. What did he tell them to do when this stuff starts happening, this desolation? Run. And so they fled, and then their birth line continues, their posterity, and they raise Christian families and probably intermarry by that point because of the new covenant, intermarry with Gentiles who are also Christians, and that's kind of how it shakes out. So what does that mean today? Israel today,
I've got 1 minute. So
okay.
Go ahead.
It's a legitimate nation state. I don't really like how it all came about and blah, blah, but it's there now. There's nothing we can. It's a legitimate nation state. They have the right to self-defense. All these. They do not have the right, though, to billions of dollars. And Christians should not be hoodwinked by bad theology to think that it's somehow a spiritual blessing that if we give them cash and send our sons to go die at war. That's where I'm at.
Joel, I appreciate you articulating that. I look forward to seeing you guys here in a couple of weeks. And I'll just say that much of what you just heard Joel say is what much of Christianity thought about this tension between Christianity and Judaism for well over 1,000 years. Pretty much. These were not unique views until about the 20th century. So it's very unique in our era of Christianity for sure in the West. But prior to this era, right or wrong, I'm not saying you got to agree with it. I think it to be as fair to Joel as I can be. You need to understand, folks, much of what you just heard from him is what many of the great church leaders that you would have cited prior to the early 20th century, they would have agreed with very much of what he just said. Joel, thank you. I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. All right?
Appreciate it. Hey, real quick, tell your listeners if they use KING, K-I-N-G, all caps, as a promo code, they'll get 25% off if they want to register for the conference.
There you go. All right, you can use the promo code KING to get a discount. See you in a couple weeks. Joel will come back. Hour 2 is next. Stay tuned. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. He's Aaron McIntyre. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. If you're a podcast listener, we are doing a little experiment right now. So maybe you guys can help us. In fact, I don't think I had a chance to tell you guys this yet. Okay. We are going to list our podcast primarily in the religion and spirituality section till the end of this month.
This is a good plan here.
Until the end of this month. Okay. Now, here's the thing. You can only list a primary, topic one at a time. So we can't be in the news politics arena and religion spirituality at the same time. We have been in news politics for years. We've consistently had one of the top 100 or so shows in the country, and that's like the biggest category on iTunes, right? So for the time being, the end of this month at least, we're going to list the show instead on religion and spirituality because we do sense that the church needs a lot of guidance right now. And there's not a lot of folks, for better or for worse, stepping forward. And I'm not saying that, it should be us, but the fact that there's not too many other options indicates how dire the predicament is. All right. So this is kind of our attempt. We've always been a biblical worldview show from the beginning, but now we're going to be even more blatantly Prophet Isaiah here. Here I am, Lord, send me. All right. To try and boost our profile in that arena. And so here's where you guys could help us. If you've not yet subscribed or hit follow on iTunes especially, or if you're on iTunes especially and have not left us a 5-star review, this would be a great opportunity right now where it would uniquely be impactful in the algorithm, because we're doing just a temporary change of listing of our primary subject matter here. Okay, so if you've put that off, this would be the perfect time for you guys to do this for us. Okay, so leave us that 5-star review right now, and thank you if you already had. Hit subscribe or iTunes follow. You guys have any quick thoughts on what I decided to do here with the Blaze over the course of the next week or so?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Do we know what we don't know? This is a way of finding out.
Yeah.
Plus, the news politics is completely 100%, 150% oversaturated right now.
Yeah. So, if you guys could help us with that, we are, there's got to be some people, man, have got to step into like the old Francis Schaeffer space. I mean, we got to get activated and engage with a biblical worldview. That's our prime directive. And so we are making it even more purposeful to target that audience here for the next week or so. We may even extend it. We'll see how it goes. Okay. But if now is the time, if you've yet to leave us one of those 5-star reviews, it would really be helpful for us to do it right now. Okay. And then also, we are brought to you by our friends over at realestateagentsitrust.com in these unprecedented times.
Bing.
Make sure if you're going to be one of those brave souls that's going to try and rediscover what it was once like in America when we had a real estate market, because we've not had one for the last 5 years. Between COVID and Let's Go Brandon, we've just not really had one. I mean, we lived in the same house in a coveted Des Moines suburb for, it's almost been 20 years. And the first 14 years we were there, if a house lasted on the market more than 30 days, we thought it had black mold. Okay. Now it was like, wow, there's a house listed on the market. Okay. So if you're like, hey, Trump's in power, we're going to turn this thing around, I got to move, now I want to go, make sure a lot's changed the last few years. Okay. Not just the interest rates. Make sure you've got an agent you can trust at realestateagentsitrust.com. We made it as simple as possible with that name. Just go there, get signed up. We'll hook you up with an agent, either in the area you're in or you need to move to, with a proven track record of success. A lot of times they're from right here in the Blaze audience. So you have values in common as well. Realestateagentsitrust.com. The name says it all. Realestateagentsitrust.com. All right. Before we switch to fake news or not, I think we'd be remiss if I didn't ask you guys your thoughts on the conversation we just had with Joel Webbon in advance of his conference, and the amount of times he has trended in recent months for what a lot of people view as all the wrong reasons. And I out of the corner of my eye, Todd, I want to start with you, because I watched you in particular as he was articulating his eschatological notions and views of Israel and what is physical Israel and spiritual Israel, which will come up in the next few months when we get to those chapters in Romans, because a lot of what he said, frankly, is exactly what your church teaches on these kinds of topics, or pretty close to it. Yeah. Okay. But what did you guys think of the questions I asked, and then also the answers that Joel gave, given the controversy surrounding him?
Well, in this case, the most important thing about the questions you asked were just explain yourself and let him speak, because that's the most productive thing in the time that we had. And listen, first of all, go into that eyes closed, not knowing anything he is other than a Protestant of some stripe, and just listen to him, no matter what you thought about him in the past. And I found nothing. Not only did I find anything objectionable, as a Catholic, I would say, well, I just heard what most Catholics, if they understand their faith, should be able to come to terms with. Which leads to my second point, and most important point. It dovetails perfectly with what you just said about Steve, your experiment with the podcast and the Francis Schaeffer space. My advice as a Catholic, and trust me, Pope Francis, USCCB, totally get it. I mean, we don't have our act together right now. I got it. Noted. Okay?
You're one of those dips that Joel was just talking about.
Yes. Put it over there. But, guys, here's the thing. I've said this before. I don't think I've said it on air. Maybe I have, but just in passing. But I'm dead serious about this. This conference that Steve's going to, it is a very, very small version of what you need to do. You need the American Protestant Church is in desperate need of its own modern day Nicaea, Trent, Vatican II. You built into Protestantism is the eternal protest. And it has become so fractured. The silos are so many, and it's never stopped, that what's going on now, the name calling, the spatting, it's just inevitable. We got to come back to first things, and that there's no way out but through. My advice, and boy, this way, you could print tickets to this thing. Somebody needs to make this happen. The great Protestant debate, because right now this thing is boiled so far down to people on X. It's just me and Jesus in my Bible. Guys, look where that's led you to. You exactly what Joel diagnosed. The freedom to call the most heinous names because I'm the elect and you're damned to hell. And it's just become so easy to do that. This thing that's happening next week, where Steve is not afraid to go, and he laid out his reasons why, and he's exactly right. That needs to be done writ large. And those who won't participate in, quite frankly, Catholic or Protestant, are not paying homage to the great history of the past, to letting the lion out of its cage. I hope I can speak this thing into existence. As a Catholic, I'm trying to, because we all need the real thing. The real thing that where the tree blooms next to the running water and the fruit grows plentiful. And we are right now wandering 40 years in the desert and seem to be proud to do it. I want something different.
Yeah, I mean, I've said similar things about the current Pope. The whole of Christendom, even if you think that Catholicism is a deception, Roman Catholicism is a deception, what have you, the entire world would be better off with a Pope that sounds a lot more like Todder's than the current one. We were Protestant alike. We would all be better off with something like that. Here's where I come down on this. Joel and others like him have shown a ferocity and willingness for conflict that we have not seen in generations coming from men like them and their vocation, which is what? Pastor. Okay? Now, you might say, well, it's conflict for all the wrong reasons, or conflict and this and that, while, maybe quote tweeting something from Right Wing Watch, as you invoked earlier, Steve. But we need to figure out how to work through this, whatever this is. If you listen to him and say, oh, you know what, actually, now that I've heard why he believes what he believes, I don't agree with it, but I understand why he says that now, not just out of context snippets that go viral. Or you might think, boy, this guy is absolutely in the wrong here. He needs to repent. I'm just telling you, we're going to be better off if we can work through that one way or another, rather than just whole cloth throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So, again, just echoing kind of, again, what Todd said, big picture thoughts here. It's the episode of Andor. One way out. The only way out is through. Okay, we have to have these conversations because, again, I don't want to throw the baby. I don't want to, the moment we... How many years have we been saying on this program, guys? On this very program. We need this. This is the pastor's fault. This is the pastor's fault. We've got too many khaki sweater vest wearing pastors who just can't be bothered for any form of fight. Well, now I see some pastors rising up who are younger, who are ready and willing and have an appetite for a fight. I just don't like the idea of just completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's all.
What was it King was the code that he gave there at the end? Because I couldn't quite hear with my one good ear. But rightresponseconference.com is where you can go. Code King, rightresponseconference.com, code King, if you want to take advantage of the discount that I didn't know Joe was going to offer, and he just kind of dropped in our lap here at the end of last hour. Let me add this, because I have spent 20 years doing this, and much of it, I believe God calling me to try and wake the church up and do and stop doing all the things that Aaron just articulated. Okay? But you've also heard me say in the last year or so that while the great heresy of this last era was taking the second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as you love yourself, and putting it in place of the first greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, was the great heresy of this era. And so we didn't turn people into sinners needing salvation. We turned them into customers. And churches didn't have creeds, they had mission statements. And they didn't have boards. They had boards of, they didn't have elders, they had boards of directors, right? Now we're franchising churches. We're not planting churches, we're franchising. We're one church at many locations. No, you're not. And there should never be such a thing. Plant a church. Don't franchise them. Right? This is all corporatization, right? But I am concerned though now, and you've heard me say this in the last year or so. Love your neighbor as you love yourself is still pretty darn important. When we had Ray Fava on the show, what was the point I kept repeating back to him? That one. We still have to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. So how do we have a righteous loathing or hatred for that which God hates? Well, we have to emulate the character of God, right? And he gave us 2 great commandments that summed up the whole of the law and the prophets. What were they? God said, love me with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. That's the beginning of all wisdom, is the fear of the Lord. To put the Lord in his rightful place puts everything else in its rightful place, right? And then we will demonstrate that we have put those things in their rightful place by loving our neighbor as we love ourselves, living out that second tablet of the law by faith through the free gift of grace, lest any man would boast. And I am concerned now that in my next 20 years, if I've got that long, that we might now, I want to make sure we don't go so far the other way now, that, hey, the jerkster called and it's all out of you all. And so this is going to be a lot of my talk down there. Because I can promise you, God will not bless a movement that violates either one of those 2 commandments. Will not. Won't. It's just that in much of this last era, it's the first one we've been violating by too far elevating the second one. But if we forsake the second one, there's no love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, strength, and mind without loving your neighbor as you love yourself either. So God won't bless this either way. He has not blessed us in this last generation. The reason why they're trying to kill Donald Trump and Elon Musk and not your pastors is because they didn't put the first commandment first, so they weren't a threat. But the next era, we can't make the opposite mistake either. You want to say something, Aaron? Go ahead.
I you guys might not even remember this conversation, but I remember back in 2017 for the 500th anniversary of, it was the 500th anniversary of the Reformation.
Yep, in 2017.
And you and Todd did these Theology Thursday series, just kind of from a Catholic perspective and a Protestant perspective, going through the Reformation. And I remember an off-the-air conversation that both of you had that stuck out in my mind. What you're describing here, Steve, this pendulum that's just swinging back and forth, that's not new in the history of the Christian church at all. And I remember one phrase that Todd, you said that I thought was very prophetic. I think you said something along the lines of, most of the developments in the Christian church throughout history, whether it's doctrinally, whether it's ecclesiastically, it's in a response to those over there. Yep. That's basically the history of the Christian church.
Yes. Yeah, because we're human beings.
Yes.
So we can't avoid it. Okay? We can't avoid it. We're human. I want to respond to this because this comes from someone who just absolutely loves our show and may love it even more than we do, frankly. All right. So this is from Deace Memes for Pumpkin Spiced Queens. Okay. And he posted this about an hour ago. He said, with all due respect to Steve Deace Show, that's my handle on X, by the way, at Steve Deace Show. I don't think asking Joel Webbon point blank if he's an anti-Semite is helpful. He's just going to say no and then spin his comments. He's proven to be an obfuscation merchant and is currently being shown in his disqualification scandal, in which he's been caught in multiple lies and spins to explain why he still can be a pastor. The real questions are his associations with people like ethno-nationalists, for example, and how they affect him. Hope I'm wrong, but don't think I am. So I didn't just ask him. Now, in fairness to Pumpkin Spiced Queens, I teased that we were going to ask him point blank if he was an anti-Semite, but that's not just what I asked him. And so you posted this, brother, before I asked the fullness of my question. I did ask him that, but then I asked him what? How would you define the term? So because ultimately we want to know what he really thinks. So I asked him an open-ended question. Tell us what you really think. Okay. Now there are other rumors out there that Frankly, even people that don't like Joel have come to his defense to say this all happened before it would be an issue with whether or not he'd be a pastor or not. And so that's why I chose not to address those. Okay. But here's the thing. This will all come out in the wash in the end. This will all get exposed in the end. I'm not concerned about that. The Holy Spirit will do its job. And then our job is when the Holy Spirit's done his job, I should say, when the Holy Spirit's done his job, our job then is to make sure our job aligns with his, right? So is Joel Webbon a young pastor who is in need of some refining or maybe largely misunderstood because he represents a viewpoint that historic Christianity sounded largely like Joel Webbon. I'm going to say this, regardless of the sideshow comments. If you are going to expunge what Joel Webbon defined on this show last hour as his core theology, brother, I mean, Todd likes to mock Catholic or Protestants who think no one was a Christian from between Constantine and the Reformation. You like to jump on those folks, right? Okay.
Yeah, because that's dumb.
Well, let me tell you what's also dumb. If not the comments on issues or individual peoples or groups that he's gotten in trouble for. What he articulated on this show last hour, if you're going to expunge from Christendom everybody who believed that, it's actually true. Like almost no one, basically you're saying no one was a Christian until the Plymouth Brethren and the Schofield Bible Notes. The apostles weren't, the church fathers weren't, no one was. No, there literally were no Christians. Because this is pretty much what everybody thought, or a variation of a theme on what everybody thought. Why do you think we debated for centuries when Revelation was written? Was it written in 90 AD, 95 AD? Was it written in 65 AD, before AD 70? Because that would determine the positions we took on these things, whether they were future events or already fulfilled.
You just know there's a bunch of dispensationalists over there right now saying, we knew you were a papist, Steve Deace!
Yes. On the other things, I'm not concerned about it. My name's not Joel Webbon. I don't need to be. I'm concerned about my character. And if I see for myself with my own eyes and ears something that I think violates what God wants us to do, I will say something. Have I not made that a regular practice? To my own economic detriment, as a matter of fact. Okay. So I'm that's what I'm going to do. And I hope people do that with me, and they have. You know, I've strategically put people around me to stop me from overdoing my best/worst instincts, or to hold me accountable when I don't. You know, so I'm just gonna let's let the truth have its way. I'll go see for myself. I mean, if you think I'm going to sit on a panel with a bunch of those people and pucker, I have to ask why you'd listen to this show for like another 30 seconds then. That's not going to happen at all. Okay? So
it's not fundamentally a Steve Deace issue. This is the fundamental problem you have in Protestantism. The second court is held and a group of people declare that something is orthodox, you're getting into the argument we always have about authority. And so who made you the one true church? Who made you
correct
the Pope?
Correct.
This is what...
Yes.
And so
there are dual ditches here. You put all of your eggs in the basket of one body of authority. If it goes bad, a little bit of leaven ruins the whole batch. The opposite problem exists. If you decentralize and democratize that authority, well, then everybody's leaven can make the batch go bad, and round and round and round we go, and where it stops, nobody knows. Okay. All right, let's get to fake news or not. Brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you've been struggling with too much chronic pain that usually is a result of too much inflammation in your joints, we may, no promises, we may have the solution for you. All right. Now, again, no promises, but over the years, over 1 million people have taken the 3-week Quick Start Challenge from Relief Factor, and 70% of them saw such good results in 3 weeks or less, they stuck with the product long term. So what do you got to lose? It's drug-free, created by physicians who can prescribe drugs. It's a supplement designed to go after the inflammation in your joints that's likely manifesting as that chronic pain that you just can't get rid of. right? Go to relieffactor.com. It'll cost you just $20 to see. If you don't see a difference in 3 weeks or less, you may find this is what you've been missing to feel better every day, live better every day. All right. So trying Relief Factor is easy. Get their 3-week quick start for only $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Call 1-800-4RELIEF, 800-4RELIEF, or visit relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com. All right. Fake news or not. And I wanted to show this post from Jeffrey Tucker over at the Brownstone Institute from over the weekend while we were off for our spring break. Because to me, this post is the alpha of the delta that we are currently living in, and also signifies what is the omega. All right? This chart is according to Pew Research. And it's documented trust in government to do what is right and just about always or / most of the time. Okay? And you're going to see starting back in 1960, the last year of the Eisenhower presidency, that number is at almost 80%. It's well over 70%. All right? And you start to see, beginning with LBJ, so post-Kennedy assassination, as Jeffrey Tucker points out, look at this trend line. You see a slight spike up in the mid-'80s. That's the Reagan Revolution. But that spike up still barely gets you above the Mendoza line of 50%. You see the highest spike up to nearly 60% in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, which was the last time we were truly united as a people in the aftermath of 9/11. And then you see that the numbers have just continued to flatline ever since. And now you get to the COVID era and the 2020 election and everything else there. And as Jeffrey Tucker points out, this chart has credibility by virtue of the simplicity of the question and the longevity of the poll. The JFK assassination was the turning point. Also striking as COVID was the final leap of faith. People feel wholly betrayed. I mean, this to me is sailors of old looking for the North Star, guys. I mean, this is just as there was that Bureau of Labor Statistics chart that showed the incident reports that went up, coinciding immediately with the rollout of the COVID jabs and the mandates. Remember that? And we said at the time that was the one COVID chart to rule them all, right? This is like the one political science chart to rule them all, in my view. I mean, this tells the tale of an entire generation of what's happened and is happening now to this country. What are you guys' thoughts?
I think one thing it would be a mistake to do is, I think the Kennedy assassination and cover up is like a perfect memoriam to it, but it's not what caused it at all. I mean, remember, we're talking about the early 60s when that happens. What after that? The rest of the 60s, as we come to know, we talked about this with the fourth turning. What happened there? It's not. There's a very incestual relationship. Our distrust in institutions on that whole timeline goes hand in hand with our overestimation of ourselves as individuals. To the point, this dovetails perfectly with what we just talked about. In terms of what I was demanding with a great Protestant roundtable. We've so fractured. Every individual is so damn proud of themselves, and increasingly with less and less reason. You're just all kinds of people who think it is their right to wallow around in the diaper, and they're the loudest and most vocal. They're putting that out on, they want everybody to see it. Meanwhile, everybody else who is just... They're trying, they're paying their bills, but they got all kinds of excuses why they can't get involved, won't be involved, won't put their name on it. That's the problem. When we were more humble, when we identified as sinners, here but for the grace of God, and we're called to something greater. Is it shocking that the math tells us that our institutions were more reliable, were more trustworthy? Not at all. There's a whole yin and yang relationship here. This is obvious. You can't have people as invincibly ignorant as they are and celebrating it with parades and demanding it, and transgenderism's handing out all the hall passes in the schools and thinking we're even remotely capable of having functional institutions.
So we're hovering at about 20%, right? That's what that chart says, around 20% or so. A little over 20%?
Yep, thereabouts.
Keep coming back to the 15% of counties that Hillary Clinton won back in 2016. I don't know. It's really interesting because when we're at 20%, is 80% of the country Republicans? No. So that means that some Democrats and probably even some left-wingers, maybe a lot of left-wingers, maybe especially the progressives, which is basically the Democrat Party right now. They're just Marxists. That's who's running it. That's who it is. That's basically their biggest voting bloc right now. It means that they don't trust in government. And what is the Bernie Sanders solution to everything? Identify a problem. Might be a real problem. And maybe probably the problem was caused by bad government policy. The solution is always more government. Again, this is not a new phenomenon here. It's not a new point that I'm making. But it just goes to show you how comprehensively brains are broken. When you've got 20% of the country, which means 80% of the country does not trust government. And part of that 80% are left-wingers who think that government created maybe a lot of problems and the only solution is more government. Turn out the frickin' lights. I mean, 20% is way too high a number. It still is too high a number. I'd like to meet those people.
I think you also see something quantified here that I pointed out in Trump's Don't Call It a State of the Union speech in his first year. That, Trump he comes from that baby boomer era. So he's born into a world where, and is growing up into a world where 80% of Americans at the start largely have faith in their institutions, right? So you see this right of center, left of center sphere of normalcy where elections were fought with a few exceptions for decades. And now you can see that trust is holistically broken. I mean, I would say that the 20%, I would say almost none of them are Republicans, is what I would say. I mean, I think, Aaron, you're right, that the 20% largely are people that just, government is in whom they live and breathe. They're the people of Chesterton's prophecy. If the government removes the government becomes the God, right? And those are the harpies watching The View and MSNBC. That's the Democratic base. And I think that the rest of the country, I mean, there are some incredible numbers a pollster buddy of mine put out on X that I shared right before the show started, where he started going through all the precinct data in congressional elections. And almost all of the counties that Trump had the greatest growth in were in blue states, in heavily Hispanic counties, or with Hispanic candidates. So again, Trump is saying, I'm going to take the whole normal space, and the left is saying, you can have it. You can have it. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends over at Constitution Wealth. Attention, investors. Good news. We believe we've turned the tide in the battle for the soul of America. Trump has been elected and is beginning now the Herculean task of pushing back against wokeism in the country. But many businesses are beginning to also mothball their DEI, CRT, and ESG programs and focus on serving customers, all customers, rather than just narrow political interest. Well, what about you? Have you joined the movement of Americans who are using their investments to hold companies accountable for their ethical behavior? If you'd like to join other patriotic citizens by aligning your investments with your conservative values, go to constitutionwealth.com/blaze. That's constitutionwealth.com/blaze for a free consultation. Constitution Wealth is a registered investment advisor. You should review Constitution Wealth's disclosures at constitutionwealth.com to understand their services and fees. And remember that all investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. Well, we now conclude with Pop Culture Tuesday, where we look at the intersection of what's trending in pop culture and that what we on the right are actually trying to conserve. And I'm going to get some cool dad points for this because I'm not just a fan of this guy's channel, but so is my 18-year-old son as well. His friends and family know him as Gary Buechler. The rest of the world, however, knows him as Nerdrotic, and he's got a fantastic channel, also a very inspiring personal story as well. So, Gary, Mr. Nerdrotic, it is a pleasure to have you on. we hope for just the first time here on our show here on The Blaze, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Hopefully it's not the first time. We'll see how I do. Or last time. We're not sure.
Well,
it's been a crazy week.
It has been a crazy week. And I want to begin with Snow White. And over the last few years, there has been this trend, especially under the old X management, or back when it was Twitter, that we talked about on our show, that the stars were so anxious to engagement farm. Both sides engagement farm all the time. We do it on our side too. And so the engagement farming that was helped by the algorithm on Twitter a few years ago was heavily tilted left. Everything that was trending every day was heavily tilted left. It's very clear the stars and or their handlers were maybe even overselling. I mean, they really oversold how quote unquote gay the live action Beauty and the Beast was. There were maybe some subtle references the adults would have gotten, but probably not a lot of kids, for example. But they really wanted to sell that because they wanted the engagement farming, right? And so that messaging outpaced maybe the wokeism level in the film and crushed their overall business model. And now what's happening is the wokeism in the films is trying to catch up to the engagement farming. And that's right when the rest of the culture has kind of turned against wokeism. And we're seeing this trend now of these like chimeric Frankenstein films, Gary, like Captain America 4 and Snow White from the same studio, by the way. And it's very clear the way some of the time where the movie jumps in some places, they intended to go down a rabbit hole and then pulled back, and it leaves this really disjointed film. Am I right or am I wrong about this?
You're absolutely right. And I would argue, and you might agree, that the culture was shifting well before Trump was elected. Like it's part of a larger wave that I think was put off. That probably should have ended a few years ago. As far as trends go, this one's gone a little too long. And you're right. We're going to get these, I call them zombie franchises now, with Frankenstein movies, where they're with Captain America, with Snow White, going to have Ironheart coming out on Disney Plus. We got quite a few things still coming out that are going to be kind of hodgepodge together to kind of dial them back, because the cultural shift was put off so long. When it happened, it gave you whiplash. It gave them whiplash. We were expecting it. It was long overdue, but they were not. And now they're scrambling. Some people recognized it early, but that's exactly what the Snow White movie is. Even the BBC pointed it out, where it feels like it wants to be half a fairy tale and then half a Marxist call to arms. And what they ended up with is both. In the end, that's what it was. And it was so unwatchable. And I think, one of the important things about like even talking about Snow White, there's dads out there with daughters. I don't have daughters and my kids are grown up, but it hit the cultural. I wouldn't even have watched it if it didn't hit the cultural zeitgeist for 2 years. Mm-hmm. 2 years. So it has become the poster child of this shift. And now that it's failing, yes, a lot of people are happy. And in particular, Steve, it's fans of pop culture, former fans of Disney who have been treated like crap by that company. And through the media and through the company itself. It's been going on for a long time. And as you mentioned earlier, it's like if you're in business, you need to bring in as many audience members and put their butts in the seats as possible. And you can't just pick and choose your audience. No, the audience chooses you.
We have been wondering here on the political side of this kind of cultural shift, Gary, we've been wondering, when do market forces take over? Right? When is it very clear that the old Michael Jordan mantra, Republicans buy sneakers too? And then we saw them come out with the Colin Kaepernick sneaker, and it sold like wildfire because it was being marketed to a totally different America than the one that we live in, right? And so there's a critical mass now of two completely wholly separate cultures to a point. But it seems as if now they're so overloading the messaging. As a guy that produced a quote unquote Christian film, and I literally put in my contract, Gary, no cheesy conversion scenes. It's right there in writing in my contract. We weren't going to ruin the movie with one of those, right? Because we kind of felt like for years in the Christian film industry, we had to shoehorn all these talking points in so that the grandmother in the front row in the pews, God bless her, okay, we meet her approval rating. Maybe that's the entirety of the audience we reach, though. I feel like I'm now watching the other side make the mistakes that the people from my subculture made for many, many years, and we finally finally figured out, we could probably just make a really good movie that has our worldview and not like intentionally put it in there, but just have it be a byproduct of who we are and focus first on telling a good story. And it seems like they have now been the ones who no longer feel compelled to just tell good stories, but to shoehorn in, ham fist in a certain, ratio of talking points for who? Who's the audience for this? Do investors want this? Because clearly the commercial audience does not. As you know, Disney had no commercial flops from, I think it was The Black Cauldron in 1983 was the last commercial flop of a major wide release film it had for 40 years. And in the last 4 years, it's had 5 of them now, counting Snow White, right? So who are they appeasing with this? Where's the money coming from to keep making these mistakes?
Oh, that's a good question. And I do believe it was coming from investor groups like BlackRock and through DEI and ESG and everything you've heard about. That's something I did not believe at first until I started doing the research on it. And it's very clear. And they're backing off quickly because, for one, that money's drying up. And not necessarily in the investor money. It's the audience, it's the theaters, and it's the way they've done business. And what they have done is become so detached from the regular audience who doesn't want that from either side. Steve, everybody loved Star Trek back in the 90s. Everybody loved it. We certainly know where most of the writers, if not all the writers, came from that side of the aisle, but they never beat us over the head, and they always asked us moral questions, and it was really entertaining. They don't do that. You're right. They don't do that anymore, and it is being funded, and that funding is now drying up because it turns out you still need the general audience who doesn't want to be lectured to. They just want to go have a good time, especially in a Snow White movie.
There have been some commercial consequences felt for Disney. I mean, the parks had been largely immune from this. Yes. Attendance is now down. I happen to be friends with the governor of Florida, so I know a little bit about some of the behind the scenes of that showdown. And I'll just simply say it's not a coincidence that that's about the same time Universal Studios decided, let's put the biggest investment into amusement park the state of Florida has seen in 30 years with Epic Adventure. Not surprising, they put the shovel in the ground right about the same time that entire thing with Disney and DeSantis went down. They saw that there was an opportunity there, right? Okay. And so I am curious to see how this is going to move forward in the future. And I'm a big Superman guy, Gary. I've seen the Christopher Reeve Superman movie I stopped counting it 231 times. That scene in Man of Steel where he puts on the red towel, off the clothesline and plays superhero. I literally teared up when I saw that in the trailer for the first time because I did that as a kid. I love Superman. That was my masculine role model growing up. And so when I see James Gunn takes this over, I'm like, oh no. Because he's a master of irreverent content, and that is not who Superman is, okay? But I have been fascinated to see his messaging on this film. He's pointed out, hey, I moved to rural Georgia. I'm surrounded by all kinds of people who vote differently than I do. His messaging seems to be very similar to what Donner, who was an atheist. Donner felt like the 70s had gotten too cynical, too nihilistic. He kind of wanted to do something that was, campy but idealistic, and looked for a guy in Chris Reeve, and that fulfilled that role. And it sounds like Gunn is going with similar messaging, but we've never seen him take on idealistic content like this. And it's really at a time that really America could use a hero like this to return, not just because he's my favorite of them all, but I find this to be almost a sociological experiment. What Gunn is going to do with this film and then how the public reacts to it one way or the other.
Yes, I certainly have my questions about Gunn, and I don't know if he's the right person for Superman, and time will tell. I'll know that the marketing rollout from DC so far has been abysmal, like absolutely abysmal, and hopefully they turn them around because I, like you, just want a great Superman film. I would like nothing more than to enjoy something this summer, and what we heard from Peter Safran when he actually invoked truth, justice, and the American way. That was like music to every comic book fan, every fan's ears. And even James Gunn himself said, hey, we're trying to kind of model this after Top Gun Maverick, which was music to everyone's ears. But with the trailer getting a so-so reaction, and it looks like they're filling it with too many characters when, honestly, I just want a Superman movie. I don't need everything else. I don't need world building. I just want a good Superman movie. And maybe that's what we get. And that's what I'm hoping for. And if they hit that mark of what Superman fans like you and I want, even get in the realm of it, it will do well. And it's, I equate it to when Spider-Man came out right after 9/11.
Yeah.
That movie just culturally hit the sweet spot.
Yep.
America was a little, they were united, but a little down, and they needed something positive. And that's what they got with the Spider-Man film in the early 2000s. And hopefully James Gunn can repeat that. We'll see.
And the iconic imagery they did at the time, where Spider-Man is at the top of the New York City skyline with the American flagpole. Right, you're right. That did hit the perfect time. As an aside, can you tell me? I mean, I used to think that there was some kind of clause in Hollywood that every fourth film had to have Philip Seymour Hoffman in it. Okay, yeah. Can you tell me? And then there's that old movie PCU where the kid does his senior thesis on how many films star. Is it Michael Caine and Gene Hackman or something? I think it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And he can't stop watching TV until he finds a channel where one of those guys is not on, something like that, right? I feel like that watching Snoop Dogg and Pedro Pascal. Can you tell me why literally everything, commercials, every film, TV shows, everything? I mean, can you tell me why we have Pedro Pascal now as leading man in romantic comedy, as Reed Richards in my favorite Marvel franchise as a kid, Fantastic Four? Can you tell me why these two are just suddenly now omnipresent? What's the market for these guys just being everywhere?
Oh, I don't want to get you in trouble. Snoop Dogg, I like Snoop Dogg. Everybody likes Snoop Dogg. I think he's everybody's weed dealer. That would be my guess. But and good for him. God bless him. But Pedro Pascal, I think he's a decent actor. I think he's completely overexposed. I think everybody's starting they're definitely sick of seeing him. I'm sick of seeing him because of Gina Carano. Gina Carano was fired for a pretty innocuous post, and he put one that was just as bad comparing to the same bad guys from Germany, and he gets every role in Hollywood. Okay, sorry, folks. According to my person I talked to at Marvel, Pedro Pascal was cast as Reed Richards because he's white passing. And that's what they said. I'm like, wow. I think he just checks a box.
You mean that because he's Hispanic, but he's white Hispanic, and therefore they thought they could check two DEI boxes at the same time, essentially? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
That's exactly. And that's their language. Well, not mine, but that's what it does, and that's what DEI has brought us. And and he's a decent actor. He was really good in Game of Thrones, right? But
I loved him with Nick Cage in that. Yeah. I mean, that movie made me laugh out loud several times a couple of years ago. But yeah.
Yeah. But in particular, Reed. I think Joel. I don't care about The Last of Us. I think he's whatever as Joel. But as Reed Richards, he's terrible. Like he's an objectively terrible choice. There's no way you're going to convince me Pedro Pascal is the smartest man in the Marvel universe in any realm whatsoever. I'd almost believe Rachel Zegler is the fairest of them all, along with that, which is not at all. But I think he's just Hollywood's little darling. It was kind of like a few years back when Idris Elba was fan cast in almost everything. Right. I think he's just turned into the Latino version of Idris Elba at this point.
Last question. I've got about a minute here. Who's doing it right? Where is there a pop culture franchise right now that you think is on the right end of the zeitgeist here?
Oh, that's a good question. I think Mario and we're going to go to video games. That's not even my realm, despite what people say. Sonic is doing it right. Sonic is the one that had put up that horrible version of Sonic, and the internet just went freaked out, and for good reason. And the director listened, and he goes, you know what? We should change it. And that's why they're doing it right. Super Mario, off to a good start. But all the stuff we loved, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Rings of Power, it's awful. I think the ones that aren't being made are doing it right at this point. I think there are studios that are going to turn things around. I think Universal probably has the best bet to do that because they're not so politically entrenched like Disney. And Warner Brothers has its own set of problems. I was going to say Harry Potter, Steve. Yeah. Until they cast Black Snape. So, which is ridiculous. You could race swap a
He's literally described by his white skin in the books. He's literally described like that in the books.
And we were supposed to get a faithful adaptation, but before that casting, I would say easily it was Harry Potter, despite the movies, but the popularity of the Wizarding World at Universal, which is brilliant, by the way. That was the strongest one. But right now, I think I think the superhero genre as a whole. I mean, we find out in July with Fantastic Four and Superman.
Yep.
But the one that's doing it right, I have to say, is Sonic.
Brother, thank you so much for joining us. Love your channel. Make sure you follow @Nerdrotic on YouTube. You will not regret it. A lot of great content there. Thank you, Gary. Good to see you.
Thank you, Steve. Take care.
You bet. All right, gentlemen, we got about a minute here. What are your thoughts on that conversation before we close it out?
I would love, based on the little I know about him, to talk with him in the future in an evergreen. To really mind, because there's so much more there in my estimation. Listen, here's the thing. People who understand that movies like this can be inspirational, deeply inspirational, are in the minority. And that's what I think ultimately has to be wrestled with. Despite the quality, I didn't believe it was going to happen, and it did with what happened with the whole Avengers universe and what they ultimately pulled off. But the fact of the matter is that these products have an deeply addictive and thus idolatrous quality to them. And that has to be reconciled, because if you use it to serve something greater, great things can happen. It is clear it's not happening in that fashion.
Romans 8:28.